James with Creation Flame here in Cedar Park, Texas. I am with Cobra, who has come down from Chicago to help us on this quick attach wheel and the LifeTrac project. Anyway, what we're going to cover in this video is the quick attach wheel assembly and basically the triumphs and issues we've come into and what we've corrected. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Cobra.
Alright, so what we have here, this is just a final like fitting everything together to make sure it lines up. So before the final assembly happens, we'll do this, because we're not going to get a chance again during the final assembly. Things are going to get pretty crowded in here, you won't be able to see. So you can see that basically the sprockets line up. And we push them together, right? So it's a nice fit. So basically what we're going to do here is take everything apart for the final assembly. So the hub comes out, everything's going to come out with the exception of these two bearings and the motor. So that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to take everything apart for final assembly. Alright, so we're ready to, this is the first step of actual final assembly. So basically we have one bearing here. We have the Zerk oriented this way. One bearing out here, that way. We've got the bolts going through, pointing in, and then the nuts on the inside. So over here, we've got the motor with the quick attach for the hydraulics.
So the fittings will go in here.
And pointing out that way. And then for this step, we have the motor held on only by 2 bolts. And the bolts that we're using are 3.5-inch bolts. And at a first glance they appear like they're way too long for the application because they have so much thread sticking out here, but this is necessary, as you'll see like several steps from now. So just 2 bolts here. They're not socked down super hard because we're going to have to undo them, and then we're including the lock washer in here too. So just 2 of those, but these are torqued down because they're not coming apart. Next step is that we're going to install the hub with the cotter key, the nut, and then the little cotter pin that goes through here. So that's the next step from here. Alright, so the hub is installed, the nut is tightened, and the cotter pin is pushed through. The cotter pin that we're using here, it's a 1/8 cotter pin, 1/8 inch by 1.5 inches long, and it's pretty important to use this size. So basically I've oriented the cotter pin so the long end here is going to bend over the axle. And I might have to get a hammer in there to actually bend it all the way over. Because with this piece here, this goes, the hub plate goes on after that. There's just not a whole lot of room in here. So so this is how I'm bending that key, or the cotter pin actually. So now with the cotter pin bent and this all installed, the next step is to install this hub plate. So the hub plate, the sprocket, the cotter key is here, and the set screws are set. It's all like, this is a done deal. And we're going to install it like such. And then tighten the lug nuts. Alright, so now hub plate is torqued down, so everything's in place. Here, the next step is that we're going to loosen these nuts and unscrew them till the point where the end of the nut flush with the end of the bolt. We're going to do that with both of these, and then we're going to install the 2 other bolts with nuts the same way, so they're going to be nice and loose, and I'll show you that in a minute. Alright, so what we've done here is loosened the bolts. You can see, or loosened the nuts rather, see how the nuts are to the end of the bolt. We've installed 2 more nuts and bolts sets down here with the washer, and the same thing. We just screwed the nuts on just to the end of the bolt. And so what we've done now is we've pulled the motor assembly. I'm going to cut in front here. pulled the motor assembly all the way back, and you can see the gap here. This is how much we've moved the motor this way. So then the next step here, is to take the second sprocket. This is going to be the axle sprocket. I've got the set screws are installed, but they're loose, and they're not, they're not intruding into the space on the inside. We want them plenty out of the way. I've taken the cotter key and I've installed it into the groove you see here, and I've got just under ½ inch of the cotter key sticking out the back side of the sprocket, as you can see, and so that's how this goes in. I've also taken the grinder and knocked off the edges, the corners of the cotter key, just to make sure we've got a nice chamfer on that, or a nice little radius. You get what I'm saying. So so we've got this assembly set up like this. We're gonna put it into place in such a way that we have easy access to the set screws with an Allen wrench later. We don't want to be orientating it like this, so we can't get at it. So it's like this. We take our chain, put it in here like this, and basically wrap the chain around the sprocket like so, and then we're getting ready to install the master link. So I'm going to get the master link ready to go and demonstrate that. So now it's time to install the master link, and this is why we've had to slide the motor back and the whole assembly back. It's because that's the only way that we're going to be able to get the master link in. You can see it's pretty big. There's no way that the master link is going to go in from this side. So we're installing the master link from the bearing side, and it just barely squeaks in here. And there's quite a little technique to getting this in, so I'm going to demonstrate the whole thing. So you can see I barely squeezed that in, and I've got the ends of the master link just barely squeaking out the holes there. There's two of these link parts that have to fit in here, and we're going to install them one at a time. And so the tool that I use to install this is a hemostat. I've tried this with pliers and I kept dropping them.
And what happens when you drop them?
It really sucks, because you drop it in there, and then the only way to get it out is pull the link out, take the chain out, and then remove the sprocket, and then you'll find it in there, and hopefully we won't have to do that. So I got a small hemostat. I've got the link in there. The ends of the master link are poking through, and I'm applying a little bit of pressure. And that one's in. So I managed to not drop it. So you can see again, I have to orient the little parts of the master link so they're just barely poking through again. And then it's time for the second one of these to go in. And so how do I do this one? Alright, so I with my hand I just take this one and try and catch it in the hole a little bit, and then I take the hemostat, which has a little curved end, and just sort of like scoop it under there to try and prevent the end of the link from falling into the hole. See that? So it's sort of lined up there, and then with my other thumb, hopefully we'll get that thing to pop through. There it goes. Did you hear that? So now, I don't think we need the hemostat anymore. So now it's just a matter of, there we go, getting the pins of the master link. They're now in this part of the link. They've worked their way through. So it just slides and we've got it poking out just like that. And there's what was keeping us hung up. A little piece of gunk in there or something. So, so now we're all the way through. Now we have the end of the master link, and it just goes on like that. Then we've got the little cotter pins, and the only way that these are going to go in is from the outside, and the other one is going to go in from the outside, pointing in like that. So we're going to put these through and bend the ends, and then we will be complete. So the cotter pins are bent over and installed, and so our chain is installed, and we've got the other sprocket is just sort of loose here. The motor is still loose and pushed back, and now it's time to install the axle. So axle slides through the bearing. Then we're going to install the thrust bearings here. The thrust bearings have a hard surface, and then like the softer case. And we're going to orient the bushings, or I'm sorry, the bearings, so that the race is facing in. And we're going to go ahead and put both of them on with the hard part of the race. They're going to be facing each other. And we've also greased the bearings. You can see we've got a lot of nice grease in there. So those just go like that. Wipe off the excess. And so now from here we're going to gently install the bearing, or I'm sorry, the axle into the other bearing. It's going to slide right in. And so from here we're going to rotate the axle so the groove lines up with the key, and we're just going to kind of install this like so. So from here, I'm sort of pushing it with my hand, and while I'm doing so, I'm sort of monitoring the key here, because we don't want, as we're pushing the axle in, we don't want to lose the key in here someplace. So by having it stick out like that, I can just sort of keep track on it. So I'm going to take the hammer and I'm gently going to drive this in. And I'm not really sure how far this is going to go in. We might not go in far enough, or we might go in a little bit too far. But in a later step, when we install the axle collars here, we'll line up these holes, and we'll be able to adjust the whole thing later. So for now, we're not really concerned about how far in we put the axle, but we'll just sort of get a feel for it. Sort of stopping around there. So that's going to be good enough for me. And so you can sort of see we ran up to the edge. The slot is up to the edge of the key, and so we're going to stop there. The next step is that we're going to now take the key, and we're going to make it flush with the back side of the sprocket, if that makes sense. So So I'm going to get a tool to do that. All right. So with a hammer, I'm just hitting the end of the axle shaft to drive in the key, because we want the key flush. There's a few more hits here. Should do it. And there we go. And so now, with this nice and flush, we're going to take the whole axle assembly, which includes the motor and the axle and all this, and we're going to try and slide this over. like so. Did you see that? The whole assembly just slid over. So we've just moved the whole motor axle assembly into place. You can see here, if you look here, that the motor is flush right up to the steel, and we're just about to tighten down these nuts. And as you move this way, you'll see that that this end of the back side of this sprocket, the axle sprocket, is resting right up against the surface of the bearing. So when the motor's flush, this is resting right up to here. These set screws are still loose. We haven't tightened these yet. Our chain has fits really nicely, and we still have not put the axle into its final position yet. I haven't yet figured out whether the axle is too far in or not far enough, but we'll figure that out in a minute. The next step right now, though, is to tighten down these bolts, and then we're going to go from there. All right, so the bolts are now tightened, and the bolts are basically a tool now, because the only way to get the master link out and the chain off is that we loosen the nut and slide the whole assembly out. So these will stay. So now the next step is to install the axle shaft collars, and they go in just like so. Right, they fit right in between the bearings. And if you take a look down through here, you can sort of see that our holes are not lining up. So when we were hitting the axle in before, we sort of overshot it a little bit, and now this is telling us that we need to come back out. So I'm putting one of the axle bolts in here, and with the hammer we're gonna tap the axle back out until those holes line up. You see it starts to move here a little bit. Lining up pretty good. And then like magic, the bolt falls right in. So then now we put both the bolts in, and then the other half of the axle collar clamp goes on underneath. And we might have to play with this a little bit.
I will take the time to say that what we used was some standard piping, 1/8" wall that we just got from a local vendor. It's really cheap. Then we double layered it in there to make it a 1/4 inch thick, just to make it more robust. That was a ridiculous waste of time doing that. We've been quoted some 1/4 inch DOM stock that would have fit this shaft nicely. I think they wanted like $70 for about 4 foot of it. We thought this was the better route. It was cheaper. We paid $15 for 8 foot of this. In the long run, we wasted at least a day making these that way, and I highly recommend just getting DOM tubing and use that instead of messing around with this. And literally we just took some of this pipe and we split it down the middle on both sides, double layered it, and made these clamps that work amazing. Anyway, back to assembly.
Alright, so back to this, but also as long as we're talking about these, the concept here is pretty clear. If the axle wants to move in or out, it can't, because the collars are hitting against the thrust bearings here. So this is completely holding everything in place. And these bearings are rated to take something, I believe it's 115,000 pounds of load going this way and that way. So I think our axles are going to stay. So back to assembly. We have nuts around here someplace. Here they are. So basically, it's self-explanatory from here. We nut this on, tighten them all up, And now that the axle is totally in place, now the very final step is to take the Allen wrench and to tighten these the set screws down. And now we're done. We can install this onto the LifeTrac and go tear shit up. Right? Here we go.
Absolutely. There you go. That's the full assembly. Sweet.